The moment she told me it was just lunch, I felt something snap. By the time I learned about the motel reservation, I wasn't heartbroken. I was already planning my exit. I stood by the front window watching as the car slowly backed out of the driveway. It turned right at the corner and vanished down the street. That was it. 10 years of my life just drove away. And yet, I didn't feel as wrecked as I thought I would. Shouldn't there have been more emotion? Anger? Sadness? But instead, all I managed was a half-hearted shrug. Just like that, she was gone. I sighed and figured I might as well deal with that leaky faucet in the kitchen. As I turned and made my way toward the sink, the last 30 minutes kept looping in my head. I'd come home from work like any other day expecting the usual routine. But what I walked into was anything but normal. My wife, Jenny, was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a full glass of wine. That alone set off alarms. She was hardly ever home before me. Her job usually had her tied up at least 30 to 60 minutes later than mine. Plus, we had this unspoken rule: whoever got home first started dinner. The kitchen was cold, untouched. And Jenny? She barely drank. The wine was the final tip-off. I barely stepped into the room before she asked me to sit. Her voice was calm but heavy. She had something to tell me. She said she needed space, just time to think. That she was moving out for a while. 6 weeks, maybe more. I sat there, stunned. My mind raced, but she was already gone emotionally. She promised it wasn't about anyone else, that she just needed to figure things out. At first, I wanted to believe her. I truly did. I clung to the hope that she'd come back once she got her head straight. But then I started hearing whispers, little pieces of gossip from people I barely knew. They said she had a new man. Not just dating but living with him. I tried to ignore it. I told myself people love to talk, especially when they don't know the full story. But those rumors kept coming and eventually I couldn't sit still anymore. I had to find out for myself. I tried to figure out where she was staying, thinking maybe I could drive by, see for myself, put my mind at ease. But every road led to a dead end. Either no one knew or they weren't willing to say. That's when I started to get paranoid. What if she was watching me? What if this whole separation was a trap, to see if I'd go out and mess around so she could use it against me in court? Suddenly, the list of things I'd jotted down, things I thought I should do, felt useless. If she really had thought that far ahead, I'd have to be just as calculated. So I started fresh. I made a new list. This time, I focused on what needed to be done right away. No hesitation, no procrastination. Some of the steps were practical, others, a little spiteful, I'll admit. I wanted her to feel this split wasn't going to be easy. I cashed out my 401k at work, took the hit, paid the penalty, and tucked the cash away where she couldn't get to it. Then I waited on the private investigator's report. That was the wild card in all this. The truth I couldn't get on my own. But in the meantime, there was one thing I still couldn't figure out: how to satisfy a basic human need without it blowing up in my face. I couldn't risk it. If Jenny had someone trailing me, even one wrong move could give her the upper hand. After thinking it over, I figured the only way to play it safe was to leave town on weekends, go on some fishing trips. Fishing had always been my escape, something I genuinely enjoyed. Jenny knew that, and it wouldn't raise any red flags if I told her I needed time by the lake. It gave me the breathing room I needed. One of those weekends, everything shifted. Tanya invited me over to talk, said it was important. I figured maybe she just needed to vent or check in, but what she laid out hit me like a punch to the chest. "I'm not here for a fling, Rob," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "This isn't some emotional band-aid. Tom and I have talked this through for months. You have something we need, and I'm hoping we can help each other." I stared at her, confused. "What are you even saying?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "To be totally blunt," she replied, "Tom can't have kids. He's sterile. We want a child, and we want you to be the one to help us have it." I didn't even know how to react. My jaw practically hit the floor. I sat there, stunned, speechless. When I finally found my voice, I managed to say, "You just said you knew I wouldn't cheat on Jenny." "I do," she nodded. "But I also know you're not the kind of man who'd turn your back on someone in need. And there's something else you don't know. Tom's not just sterile. He hasn't been able to be intimate with me for over a year." It all clicked. The night before, she'd been unusually passionate, like she was catching up for lost time. And that bit about not wanting to give Tom sloppy seconds, that wasn't about me. That was her way of protecting his pride. She didn't want me to see him as less of a man, not even in private. Then Tom came in. He was quiet at first, then finally said, "Rob, I want to be the man who can give my wife everything she needs. But I can't. I can't lose her though. I need your help. Can I count on you?" I sat there, stunned. Then, slowly I gave him a nod. That Sunday I invited Tom, Tanya, and a few other couples over for a barbecue. It was a good way to keep things casual. Once the other guests left, Tom wandered into the den to mess around on my computer while Tanya followed me upstairs. By the time I finished undressing, she was already on the bed, her eyes locked on mine, urging me not to waste time. It felt surreal, but in that moment, it all felt like part of some strange, fragile agreement. My house, my money, my life. Somehow it had all turned into a waiting game. Then came the call I expected. Jenny phoned trying to sound calm. She said I was being unreasonable, that there was no need to involve lawyers. But I'd made up my mind. I was done with the in-between, the not quite married, not quite separated charade. You don't want to be with me anymore, I told her. So I'm done pretending there's still something to salvage. I need to move on. We agreed to meet at Angelo's. It was the first time I'd laid eyes on her since the day she left. And I won't lie, she looked beautiful. I felt the ache in my chest as soon as she walked in. I wasn't just going to miss her, I already did. But I didn't let it show. When she sat down, a man walked over and handed her a manila envelope. She looked puzzled, then opened it. Her expression froze. Inside were divorce papers, this time filed on grounds of infidelity. She stared at the word, infidelity, and then looked up, her eyes landing on the shattered version of herself reflected back from the chair across from me. Her face drained of all color and then it hit her. I saw it happen in real time, recognition settling in like a punch to the gut. She whispered, almost like she didn't believe it herself, "Oh my God." Then she collapsed into the nearest chair and began to sob. Deep, broken sobs that echoed through the restaurant. I stayed just long enough to make sure the envelope was in her hands and then I walked out. I wasn't going to sit there and comfort her. Not this time. She must have followed me because when I got to the parking lot, I noticed her car parked nearby. As I opened my door, I saw her rushing toward me. I didn't say a word. I just slid into the driver's seat and pulled out. In my rearview mirror, I caught sight of her running back to her own car, starting it up in a panic. I didn't want to make a scene, not in the office lot, not where we both worked. But I wasn't done talking. I just needed a place where we could be honest without an audience. So I kept my speed low, just enough to let her follow without falling behind. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the lot at Bud's Bar and Grill, a quiet place on the edge of town that rarely drew a crowd on weekday afternoons. By the time she parked, I was already at the bar, nursing a beer. When she walked in, she looked unsure of herself, lost even. I motioned toward the stool beside me, but I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence do the talking. Eventually, she said something about coming to a financial agreement. I chuckled, not out of humor but disbelief. "What do you think you're going to get from me, Jenny?" I said. "My car's a lease, so that's off the table. I live in a furnished apartment. Nothing there's mine. You'll spend a year in court, burn through thousands in legal fees, all for maybe $200 out of a paycheck." She started to respond, but I cut her off. "And if the court tries to garnish my wages? I'll quit. I'll walk out the same day. What's left after that? You try to get the judge to throw me in jail for contempt? Is that really where this ends?" She didn't answer. Just reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. It had my name on it, for Rob's eyes only. I looked at her, confused. She shrugged. "I don't know what's in it. Came to my apartment like that. I never opened it." I tore it open and began to read. "Hey Bud, if you're reading this then I'm gone. There's a reason I chose you. It wasn't Tanya, it was me. I'm the father of our child. I knew I wasn't going to be around and I needed someone I trusted to look out for them. That person was always you. You were the only one I believed in. Don't let me down, man. Take care of our girls." I sat there holding the letter, my heart pounding in my chest. I passed it over to Jenny without a word. The names Mark and Monique Reels came back to me in that moment. Two people who had been part of our lives for years. Mark and I had met back in the service. He was like a brother to me. At first he'd come by alone. Later, after he married Monique, they'd visit together. Family friends in the truest sense. Or so I thought. We used to make a real effort to spend the holidays together, Mark, Monique, their kids, and us. Sometimes we hosted, sometimes they did, and other times we'd all meet somewhere outdoors for a cookout or a casual get-together. Our children grew close over time, running around the backyard like cousins while we shared food and laughter. But unlike my marriage, which often rode the highs and lows like a stormy sea, Mark and Monique always seemed emotionally flat, steady, maybe even too steady. It was hard to tell what really went on beneath the surface. I remember one particular night. We were reminiscing about our weddings, laughing about silly mishaps and awkward moments. That's when Monique brought up her bachelorette party. She casually admitted there had been a male stripper involved. Mark froze. His expression turned to one of disbelief. Apparently he had no idea. Monique shrugged it off, saying it was all in good fun. You just accepted that? He asked, his voice rising. I could tell something deeper was bubbling under his skin. He wasn't just surprised, he was hurt. Angry even. And it didn't make sense, not completely. I leaned in, trying to calm him. Hey man, relax. You're making this bigger than it is. You had a wild night too, remember? You're not exactly innocent either. But she lied to me, he said through gritted teeth. She said it was just the girls hanging out. Nothing else. His reaction felt overblown. I didn't get why this was shaking him so hard. Unless he was hiding something too. Something that hadn't come to light yet. Later, everything spiraled out of control. I remember holding Angela's hand. She had passed out unexpectedly. When she opened her eyes, relief washed over me. A doctor who had been nearby immediately checked her vitals. Where am I? She asked groggily, her eyes darting around the room. You fainted, I said gently. We're taking you to the hospital. The doctor's going to run some tests just to be safe. How are you feeling now, ma'am? The doctor asked. Angela didn't answer, just stared into the distance. As we drove, she eventually began to protest. Peter, I'm okay. Really. We don't have to go to the hospital. I squeezed her hand. Let's just be sure. It's probably nothing, but I need to know for certain. We waited what felt like forever for the test results. I wanted to stay by her side all night, but she insisted I go home. She even asked me not to tell anyone, especially the kids, until we knew more. When I got back, I felt hollow. The house was quiet, but my head was anything but. I couldn't eat, couldn't rest. I didn't want company, didn't want comfort. That night, something snapped. I poured myself a drink, then another. And I kept replaying what Monique had said. Her voice, her eyes, her tone, it all seemed sincere. Why would she lie about something like that? But if she was telling the truth, then it meant Mark had betrayed me. And not just him, Angela too. The rage surged again, hotter this time. I could feel it in my temples, pounding behind my eyes. I couldn't just sit there and stew in it. I turned to Monica, our oldest, and told her to get ready. I threw on a coat over my pajamas, grabbed my keys, and made for the door. I needed to talk to Angela. Face to face. Monica, her eyes wide with fear, tried to stop me. You can't go charging in there like this, she said. You'll lose control. You could end up behind bars. I ignored her. My hand was already on the doorknob. Go to the car, I muttered. I'll be right behind you. I placed the order at the front desk for Angela's medication and was just about to sit down when I heard Monica's voice rise behind me. I'm calling the police, she shouted, voice trembling. The nurse peeked around the doorway, alarmed. Monica stood frozen, clearly unsure whether to go through with it. She didn't want to end up in a jail cell, and in that moment she chose to listen to me instead. Rot in misery, she shouted toward Angela's room before stumbling away, holding back tears. I walked back into the ward, trying to steady my breath. The nurse was still with Angela, gently checking her pulse and examining her neck. She murmured calm reassurances as she finished her preliminary checkup. I stayed silent in the corner, waiting, not wanting to interrupt. Angela sat quietly on the hospital bed, her skin ghostly pale. She finally looked up at me and said, almost in a whisper, I know you still loved me. I saw it in your eyes. I know you were sorry for what you did, but you broke again. This time it was me who lowered my head. Her words hit deeper than I expected. They weren't cruel, they were resigned. And they broke something inside me. After I finished speaking, telling her everything I'd held back, Angela's face changed. I saw it. Something clicked. She realized how much damage she had done, not just to me but to herself. Her pride melted away. She slid off the bed, dropped to her knees, and clung to my legs. She sobbed, her voice cracked and desperate, pressing kisses to my feet. Her grip was tight, shaking. In the commotion, a monitor wire slipped from her hand, setting off a warning beep. But neither of us moved to fix it. The moment was too raw, too human. A minute later, the nurse returned, calmly addressing the equipment first, then Angela's treatment. Afterward, Angela's children came to see her. That's when I told them the full truth, not just about her condition but also about the divorce. In the following months, Angela lived in hope. She believed she had been forgiven, not just by me but maybe even by fate. She'd always believed that her illness was some form of punishment for what she'd done. She clung to the hope that healing meant redemption. But one afternoon, a doctor walked into her room with a clipboard in hand and news that stole the air from her lungs. The treatment had started too late. If she had come in sooner, kept up with regular exams, they might have caught the tumor in time. Around then, an old friend of mine, Butch, showed up in my life again. We hadn't talked much since he and his wife, Martha, split up 6 months earlier. They had once been close friends of mine and Deanna's. But after their divorce, Deanna wanted nothing to do with them and made it clear she thought Butch was partly to blame. Butch studied my face as we sat down together, his brow furrowing. "You look like you've been through a war, man. I wasn't expecting your call. I figured after the split I was off your radar." And honestly, he wasn't wrong. I hadn't reached out, not since Deanna made it plain she didn't want him around. But something about that Wednesday, something about the quiet, I needed to talk. She'd usually be gone for most of the day, especially in the early afternoons. Rarely back before 3 o'clock or 3:30. Whenever I asked what she was up to, she brushed it off, said it was nothing but errands, a bit of shopping, maybe dropping off dry cleaning. Nothing out of the ordinary. I took another slow swallow of my beer and signaled the bartender for another. Butch caught my expression and poured it himself. "The last sign," I said, staring at the foam, "was in the bedroom." Things slowed down, then stopped altogether. Unless I really pushed the issue, she wouldn't even touch me. And when she did, felt like I was with a mannequin, just going through the motions. Cold. Lifeless. Butch leaned back, watching me, then nodded slowly. "Well, now that you've laid it all out," he said, "I think it's pretty clear. The signs are all there." I nodded. "Yeah, and not just the ones I told you. There are others. Little things that keep adding up. I've turned it over in my head 1,000 times, trying to figure out a way to catch her in the act. But either she's too careful or she's getting help from someone. I can't find a single piece of solid proof, but it's obvious. She's cheating. I just need to have something concrete, enough to make sure she doesn't walk away with everything in the divorce." "You came to the right guy," Butch said, giving me a half smile. "Let me give you a hand." He knew a few things about messy marriages. His own had taken a toll. When he and Martha split, it shook him up bad. He told me that she'd been reluctant to fully commit from the beginning, and although they tried to patch things up, the last 4 or 5 months of their marriage had been rough. There was distance, resentment, a growing silence between them. Things hadn't been much better for Deanna and me. She'd been angry, always on edge, snapping over the smallest things. And she'd shut down on me physically. Our sex life had never been great, especially after she found out she couldn't have kids. But we'd managed, at least until recently. The last time we made love was over 3 months ago, and even that felt like she was somewhere else entirely. Detached. It wasn't just unfulfilling, it was painful to even think about now. She had seemed shell-shocked afterward, as if the act itself had left her wounded. I had to keep myself from laughing bitterly. Looking back, the signs had been there all along. And now was the time to push back. The first real move in what was shaping up to be a quiet, vicious war. Word had it that her lover didn't leave his wife after all. So Deanna ended up having to sell the house just to cover her lawyer's fees. But I wasn't worried. Apparently, her lover was footing the bill for her new apartment. The very one I'd seen her go to more than once. Turns out the place is in his name. He pays the rent. She gives him company. He gets to claim the apartment as a business expense. Free rent for her, and he gets his needs met on the side. Not a bad deal for him. Then came that conversation. That one moment that made it all click. "Why are you meeting someone today?" I asked her one Saturday. "It's just a friend." "Nothing important," she said without meeting my eyes. "Doesn't it seem odd? You've got plans on a Saturday and you're being vague about it." She shrugged. "It just came up." "Why are you so worried? Do you think I'm doing something wrong?" "I'm not supposed to suspect anything," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "They say guilty people are the ones always pointing fingers." Deanna looked up, startled. "No, of course not. I haven't done anything wrong," she said a little too quickly. "I wasn't accusing," I replied, my voice softer now. "Just wondered if you had plans today. Somewhere to be." She tensed just slightly, but I caught it. Her body stiffened and her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Something wasn't right, and deep down I think we both knew I'd already figured it out. Later that day we noticed her car was gone. I stood there, unsure what to do next. I looked over at Butch and just said, "Take me back to my car, would you?" He glanced at me, concerned. "What now?" I shrugged. "I'll figure it out as I go." He gave me a solid clap on the shoulder and shook his head. "Man, I'm sorry." "Yeah," I muttered. Weirdly, it's kind of a relief to finally know. But, man, it still makes me sick. The truth hit harder than I expected. Knowing that it was over, that everything we'd built was falling apart, left a pit in my stomach that I couldn't shake. As I sat there thinking, I reminded myself of how things had really been. Deanna had always hinted that I wasn't enough. Too quiet. Too stable. She needed excitement. Something to make up for the so-called lack of stimulation in our life together. Like one of those commercials where someone buys a flashy car to distract from the emptiness they feel inside. Only instead of a car, she'd gone looking for someone else. Apparently he hadn't fixed her either. That's when the front door slammed open. Deanna burst in calling out, "Pete, where are you?" I didn't move. I was already in the great room sitting there with my arms crossed, waiting. She ran in, spotted me and just stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mouth opened but no words came. Then she collapsed to the floor, rocking back and forth, moaning, crying, not speaking. I didn't think she had anything left to say. Maybe she'd run out of excuses. Or maybe she hadn't had time to rehearse the lies she usually fed me. Lies are hard to spin on the spot when you don't expect to be caught. Finally I stood. "I'll pack a bag tonight and leave first thing in the morning," I said quietly. "I'm calling Harold to start the divorce process. You'll need to find your own lawyer. Harold works for me." That snapped her out of it. Her head shot up, arms flailing as if to stop me. But it was too late. I'd already made up my mind. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door and got into my car. As I pulled away I finally exhaled, slow and shaky. I hadn't even realized I'd been holding my breath. Once I calmed down enough to focus, I pulled over to the side of the road and grabbed my phone. I called Butch. I needed somewhere to land for the night, and Butch's place made the most sense. I gave him a call and he didn't hesitate, told me to come on over. By the time I got there, I was running on fumes, but we sat up for hours anyway, nursing beers and going over everything. I told him about my last conversation with Deanna, all the back and forth, and how it ended with her sobbing on the floor. Butch just shrugged like he'd been expecting something like this all along. "I figured," he said finally. "I know the guy she's with. He's not some random stranger. He's tight with Jack, basically Jack's right-hand man. So if that's who she's wrapped up with, then you were just the bonus. Her prize for loyalty. Makes you wonder if Jack handed her off as a reward." He looked at me, his mouth set in a hard line. "Maybe they're setting you and her up in some little love nest. One big happy rotation. You take the weekdays, he gets the weekends." I shook my head, the bile rising in my throat. The thought alone made me sick. The next day Deanna came to see me. I didn't want to talk, but I also knew I needed to hear what she had to say. She looked me in the eye and said, "Pete, it's not what you think. I'm not sleeping with him. I've never cheated on you. You're the only man I've been with since we got married. I swear to you." But I'd heard enough lies. "I'm sorry," I told her. "I just don't believe you. Saturday afternoon, you were alone with him. In his car. For over an hour and a half." I turned and walked away before she could answer, heading straight into the kitchen. It felt like neutral ground. The one place in the house that wasn't emotionally charged. We'd had it redone a few years ago by a designer she picked out, and everything in it screamed her taste, not mine. Still, I needed space and it was the best I could find. I took a seat at the table and waited. She followed me in a few moments later, carrying a fresh pot of coffee and a plate of shortbread cookies. My favorite. She placed them on the table and sat across from me. She looked good, like she tried to put herself together before coming. Hair brushed neatly back, eyes soft and heavy. That's when she said something that stopped me cold. "Marty started asking questions. About where you were." "What?" "Yeah," she said quietly. "At first I didn't think much of it. Just casual stuff. But then it became more regular. You were late for dinner often. Sometimes you left again at night. Little things." She kept pressing me and eventually, I started to wonder. She looked down. "I began to suspect maybe you were the one being unfaithful." I sat there, hands folded, trying not to let my expression crack. She'd flipped it. She'd been watching me, reading into everything I did while I was doing the same with her. Two people in the same house, both drowning in suspicion, and neither of us willing to say it out loud. Eventually I managed to calm down. Barely. Her tone, her explanations, it took the edge off a little, but I was still trying to wrap my head around all of it. How could things have gone this far? How could she stand there and say these things like they made sense? I took a deep breath and said, "So let me get this straight, you're saying that you fell for all this stuff, believed it, let it guide your choices, and now you expect me to just accept that?" Deanna looked down and I could see she was struggling. But I wasn't done. "I'm having a hard time understanding how someone could be that naive. Sounds too convenient. Like an easy excuse." "It's not an excuse," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "It's the reason. There's a difference. She looked up again, softer now. Pete, I'm not blaming you. I know you didn't cheat on me. I know that. I was lost. I was confused. I didn't know where else to turn. I sat still, not speaking. She kept going. When he was traveling, I didn't think much of it. But after he got back, he called. Asked if we could grab lunch. So I met him at the diner. Just lunch. I said nothing, but my heart pounded. She looked straight at me now. During lunch, he asked me to spend the night with him. She paused, waiting for my reaction. I told him no, she added quickly. He kept pushing. I kept saying no, but then I said maybe. Not yes. Just, maybe. That word, maybe, slammed into me. She didn't even have to say yes. Just the door being left cracked open was enough to set the whole thing in motion. She was watching me carefully. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my pulse in my ears. I was breathing deeply, counting to 10 over and over just to keep from exploding. I stayed in my chair, held myself together. Barely. And still she wasn't done. Maybe later, she repeated, almost whispering. That's what I told him. I didn't mean to say it. I didn't know what else to do. Right? I muttered. And now the real Deanna shows up. Like she was just waiting for the chance. I don't know how much more of this I can take, I said, my voice low. What's the point of all this? You confess you feel better? Is that what this is? You want forgiveness? You want me to tell you it's okay? I stood up slowly. Well, I'm not a priest. And if you've said everything you came to say, then I need to leave, before I lose it. She lunged for me. Reached out, like touching me would erase everything she just told me. But I stepped back. Her face crumpled, grief, desperation, panic, but not fear. Not even now. For a moment we just stared at each other. I had nothing left to say. My face was blank, my heart was like ice. She swallowed hard, then spoke again. We made plans to meet for dinner Saturday night. I told you I'd be going to a movie with Marty, but it was a lie. He made a reservation at the Skyview Motel. The one near the diner. My thoughts began spinning. Saturday night. That was the night. She was with him. Alone. And this time there was no maybe. But the worst part wasn't what she did. It was that she was ready. Willing. Just because someone gave her attention. Just because she didn't feel adored for a little while at home. That was the part one couldn't understand. I was cheating on you. Those words just sat in the air like smoke, refusing to clear. But the part that cuts deepest, I said quietly, is that you never once thought to come to me. Not before it got this far. You were already gone, mentally, emotionally, long before you admitted anything. All those lunches, the quiet dinners, the lingering conversations. You were still living in our home, still sharing a life with me, but your thoughts were with him. You shut me out, pushed me away, and stopped making love to me, while at the same time, you were planning to give yourself to someone else. I could barely say it out loud. You'd accepted his offer. You were preparing to sleep with him. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I paused, my legs shaking slightly beneath the table. I tried to steady it but couldn't. In marriage there are 3 vows that matter most: faithfulness, honesty, and commitment. You broke 2 without blinking, and you were ready to break the 3rd. That was it for me. There was no way back. The next morning I filed for divorce. Deanna didn't fight it. Not once. Maybe she knew deep down that any chance she had to fix it had already come and gone. As for Philip Tartan? No, I didn't let him just walk away clean. A few days after I moved out of the house, word got back to me. He'd been attacked outside a bar, jumped by 2 men in masks. It wasn't a scuffle. It was a beating. Bad enough that several of his ribs were shattered, and he lost a testicle in the process. Police are still looking for whoever did it. They've got no names. No leads.